What's up? This is the Too Tall Sports Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. My guest in a little bit is going to be Nick Ashbourne. He is a sports writer for SportsNet up in Canada. He lives in Toronto and covers the Toronto Blue Jays for Yahoo Sports Canada as well. He has a podcast called Blue Jays Happy Hour where he and a buddy react after every Blue Jays game. So I have a really fun interview with him talking about all the Toronto sports scene and all that stuff, his upbringing as a writer, and then this up-and-coming Blue Jays team. So it's a really exciting time to be a Toronto Blue Jays fan with all the talent that they have and all the sons of former big leaguers that you will recognize. So a lot of fun talking to Nick in a little bit. But first, I got to give you my 2 cents, and it's going to be about Chris Paul. When you get older, things seem to get a little bit tougher, as most of you know. But oftentimes you still have that gear where you can still be like, you know what? I still got it. And then you are Chris Paul with a 2-0 lead and you realize you don't got it. Chris Paul has blown 5 2-0 series leads. He was the only one before this to hold the record with 4 2-0 series leads. So when he's up in a playoff series, and it's 2-0, he eventually ends up losing them, which is the trend we're on. The numbers don't lie. A lot of people call Chris Paul the point god, and he is an all-time great. I believe a 12-time All-Star, multiple-time all-defensive player, and he's had a late career resurgence, and it seems like I got to give the guy credit for this. Wherever he's been in the last few years, whether it was Houston, OKC, you know, when he got to the Clippers originally, that organization, as all of you know, was doing nothing for a long time. And he turned that team with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan into a legit playoff team. And when he went to Houston, he and James Harden had a thing going there. And then he went to OKC in a rebuilding team and got them to the playoffs. So, and then he gets to Phoenix, again, another team with a long history of not doing much since the Steve Nash, Mike D'Antoni days. So I got to give Chris Paul credit, and I am not a huge supporter of his, as most of you know. But it seems like in the last 5 to 7 years, where he's been, winning happens. So I have to give him credit for that. Now, you can argue if he's a top 5 point guard of all time. He's right there with the best of them. So I got to give him that. He's going to have, crazy stats over time. He's played a long time in the NBA. But can you really be the quote unquote point god if you've got that many series blown leads when you're up 2-0? It wasn't that long ago last year when the Phoenix Suns were up 2-0 on the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Finals, up 2-0, and lost that series and lost the NBA Finals. And a lot of people argued this year was the best shot for Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker's a year older. DeAndre Ayton is in a contract year. Monty Williams is coach of the year. You got all the pieces around you. Mikal Bridges hasn't missed a game in 4 years. These dudes were ready, it seemed like, to take the next step. And then Luka Doncic comes in and says, no. And after those first 2 games, Chris Paul and Devin Booker were not giving Luka any credit. And you may have remembered the highlight where Booker kind of flopped and fell on the ground and looked right into a camera and said, this is the Luka special, basically making fun of Luka for flopping and complaining about calls, which he does do. But it was almost like Luka said, all right, enough. And a switch went off in Luka's head. And he proceeded to dominate the rest of that series, and they won 4 of the last 5, including, as most of you saw, a blowout win in Phoenix against the Suns. The first overall seed hasn't had that much success lately. If you look at recent history, the 2020 Bucks, even though it was the bubble year, they didn't make it to the finals. The 2021 Jazz, the top overall seed, most wins. 2021 Jazz didn't make it to the conference finals. And then the 2022 Suns aren't going to make it to the conference finals. So there's an argument to be made for load management. There's an argument to be made for not, blowing your load too soon, as they say. But this Phoenix Suns team, what a disappointment. You get a game 7 at home and you fail to close it out. You could just tell from the tip, they were not ready for that moment. They were, I don't know if it was nerves or scared or whatever, but Luka and the Mavs, which with, I would think, very less superior team, much inferior, if you will, to the Phoenix Suns, way more talent on the Suns. But Chris Paul got old overnight. After going up 2-0, he averaged 9 points a game, 6 assists, and 3.5 turnovers over the next 5 games. I think he had more turnovers than field goals made. So, and he's lost his last 4 game 7s. Can you really be a point god with that kind of resume? He is one of the all-time greats. He will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But it almost leaves you with something to be desired, doesn't it? Because you get a lot of people in the NBA world that give a lot of heat to Charles Barkley for never winning a ring, Karl Malone for never winning a ring, Reggie Miller, Allen Iverson, all these guys that are the all-time greats, Patrick Ewing, for never winning a ring. And it does count against you if you've had knocks at the door as long as this guy's had in terms of Chris Paul. So I don't, it's fair to slander him, but look, I'm not a huge fan of him. I don't like the way he's kind of a dirty player, in my opinion. There's a lot of evidence of that out there. He's kind of a flopper. He works the referees a lot. And because he's been the former Players Association president, he's kind of been bulletproof. And it seems like if you're not a Hall of Famer, you can't say anything about Chris Paul. Patrick Beverley was on TV this week. Obviously there's a personal vendetta there, but he's basically saying that Chris Paul can't play defense anymore at 37 years old. He called him a traffic cone because if you do anything to him, it's just going to be stationary and stay there. So there's a lot of heat coming at the Suns and Chris Paul, Devin Booker as well. And at this point of Chris Paul's career, that had to be their best shot. This Phoenix Suns team is going to look a little different this next year coming up. The owner has not committed to DeAndre Ayton before the season. You got to think he may walk. I believe this was the Suns' best chance at a title, and it evaporated like that. I got to give props to Luka, though. This man was on a mission and is not afraid. People forget Luka Doncic has been playing against top-tier talent in Europe since he was 16 years old. He was like the MVP of the Euro League at 17 or 18 years old. This dude is not afraid. And now we're seeing the Luka is about to take over the league moment like Giannis did over the last 2 years. Maybe Luka is stepping into that mold. And you're seeing a shift, right? You look at some of the best players in the league. Yes, you still have LeBron. Yes, you still got Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. But now outside of the young guys like Ja Morant, Trae Young, and all that, Luka, Jokic, and Giannis, the Euros, are taking over the league. Now, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but these dudes seem more ready or their mindset's different. For whatever reason, the league is now being taken over by the European players. And they're all amazing. And look, Embiid had a great year. I had no problem with Jokic winning the MVP. His numbers were crazy this year, but it's Luka's time. It's definitely Luka's time. And he's only 23 years old. So I'm really impressed with Luka and the job that Jason Kidd has done, now getting another chance as a coach. He was young and they say him a little bit immature when he got the Bucks job. Then he went to Brooklyn. Now he's ready for this opportunity. And he outcoached Monty Williams in that series against the Suns. So we'll see if the Dallas Mavericks can hang in there against the Warriors. It might be a whole different beast. Is this the end of the peak for the Warriors? Do they still have one good run left in them? We're going to find out in the coming weeks with these series. But props to Luka Doncic. I'm curious to see how you guys feel about Chris Paul. Yes, he's an all-time great, but you can't deny the lack of production, kind of in that James Harden mold of we're always left with something to be desired with these guys that are great regular season players. So some guys have it and some guys don't. Well, with that, I will get to my interview with Nick Ashbourne. Hope you enjoy it. Lots of baseball talk, lots of Toronto Blue Jays talk with this up-and-coming young Blue Jays team. So hope you guys enjoy that interview, and it's coming at you right now. What's going on? Welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. On the other side of 100 episodes, this is episode 101. Thanks for joining me again today. My guest is going to be Nick Ashbourne. He's a sports writer from Toronto, and he covers the Toronto Blue Jays part-time for Yahoo Sports Canada and SportsNet, which is the big network out there in Canada. He's also co-host of the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast, which is a show that is kind of a reaction show after every Blue Jays game. And he does have a co-host as well. We talk all about Blue Jays baseball, kind of where he came from, the Toronto sports scene, whether it's Maple Leafs, Raptors, all that stuff that us Americans don't really understand if you don't grow up there. So a lot of fun with this one. Great information. We dive into lots of topics, the up and coming Blue Jays. All the sons of former major leaguers are on that team. There's at least 3 of them. So we have a good time chatting about the Blue Jays and kind of where that team is now and where he sees them going forward. So great chat with Nick Ashbourne today. As always, you can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. That's on Instagram, on TikTok as well, at Too Tall Sports Podcast. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. You can check me out there. I post clips and content almost every day on my social media channels. So if you want to see my fun videos and my breakdowns of pitching mechanics and all kinds of stuff that's going on in sports and my opinions, check out my social media links at Too Tall Sports Podcast. You can follow the show on YouTube if you want to watch the interviews. So go ahead over there, subscribe, hit the like, share, comment, whatever you can to help boost the show. That'd be great. I drop episodes every Thursday morning. Usually it's about 4 a.m. Pacific time. So you can watch the interviews on YouTube, or if you want to listen on the audio side, check out Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you get your audio podcast. Check that out there. And if you haven't already, hit the 5-star. I've been saying it for 100 episodes. Why not say it for 101? Hit the 5-star on Apple Podcasts. If you scroll down, you can see that on the episodes page. Also, Spotify offers 5-star ratings as well. So if you're enjoying this content, that's the least you could do is hit me with a 5-star. It would really help the show, so I would appreciate it. And with that, let's get to my interview with Blue Jays sports writer Nick Ashbourne. All right, welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. My next guest is a sports writer covering the Toronto Blue Jays for SportsNet and Yahoo Sports Canada. He's the co-host of the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast, which covers each game after every game, and they discuss what happened on the field that day. He's also a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America, and we will discuss all things Blue Jays baseball, changes in MLB, and life in Toronto with Nick Ashbourne. What's going on, Nick? Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, definitely. Glad to have you. I did check the weather today in Toronto. It actually looks like it's pretty nice right now, isn't it?
Oh, it's a relief. It's been a bit of a grim April and May, and finally being able to get out. I assume most of your audience is American, so what I'm going to say Celsius-wise might not follow, but getting 18, 20 is really nice right now. I think that's kind of low 70, something like that.
Exactly. That's what I saw, about 70 Fahrenheit, which is like beautiful from what I saw.
Yeah, I sat on a patio and had a beer the other night, and it had been months since I'd done that.
There you go. Well, hey, good. I'm glad to hear that. I was going to ask you this at the end, but I might as well ask you now. When's the best time to go visit Toronto? Is it this time of year?
Yeah, maybe into June. Like it hasn't quite got fully warm yet, but it gets really hot. Like it gets deep into the 30s, so it gets close to 100 deep in the summer. So I think mild in June's a good time.
Got it. Okay, cool. Is there something that if we've never been to Toronto before, what do we need to see if we go visit there?
When I have friends visit me, I always take them to Chinatown. Toronto's got a great Chinatown, amazing food, a cool mall there. And then there's also a part of the city called Kensington Market that's right by it. And it's just very quirky, like the weirdest kind of fusion foods and vintage stores and off the wall bars. And so within a couple blocks radius, you get this really cool Chinatown and this very odd part of the city. And that's that'll eat up an afternoon.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, if I ever get out there, I'll definitely have you be my tour guide if possible. So I was looking into your background a little bit. We talked a little bit pre-show. You're originally from Canada, originally from Toronto. I was curious what life was like growing up in the sports world, because, as I also follow basketball too. The Raptors were new in the 90s, and then Vince Carter came along and kind of took over the city. It's always Toronto's, from what I hear, a big hockey town, of course, and the Maple Leafs are still in it right now in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But for you, even baseball wise, what are your memories about growing up in Toronto sports?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it started with the Maple Leafs. Like, I lived and died hockey. That's sort of the first sport you get introduced to. Even though, like, my father was an immigrant from the UK, he latched onto hockey very early. And I think that's something that happens with a lot of immigrants to Canada. It's sort of an avenue into the general culture, is to get involved and really get into hockey. So I played hockey as a kid starting out, and I was okay, but the skating was no good. So it just wasn't going. I was a great road hockey player, but no good at any kind of organized ice hockey. And then I started playing baseball a little bit, getting into baseball. Basketball is something I actually ended up coming to later in life. I didn't get as tall as you, but I got over 6 feet. So I was able to do some things on a basketball court. But yeah, the Leafs are what I lived and died with early on. The Blue Jays, were kind of always a mediocre team. Like they were just above 500, but not particularly close to the playoffs. And my experience being a fan of the Blue Jays growing up was just cheering for individual players. Like it was Roy Halladay. Like me and my friends would go to Roy Halladay starts. Like you'd make that effort. They used to have this deal where you could go to every Blue Jays game for $100 as long as you went to like the nosebleed seats way up high.
Yeah.
So yeah, me and my friends in high school, when you don't really have much money in your pocket, I think it's an incredible entertainment opportunity for a summer to be able to do that. So those are some of my fondest memories with that. I mean, I still live and die with the Leafs a little bit. Like my heart was still beating really hard last night in that game 5. And if they're ever able to win a Stanley Cup, the way this city will explode will be something else.
You guys definitely deserve a Stanley Cup championship.
That we do. We've had some very bad luck. I don't know. The current core of players has gone something like 0-7 in closeout games. Like they just keep getting to the precipice of eliminating teams and they can never quite do it.
Right.
It's 1967 was the last cup. So that's, well before my birth. It's like my mom grew up in Toronto as well. She remembers it as a child, like her parents, my grandparents, literally going for walks around the block because they couldn't possibly watch it. Like it,
yeah.
Even back then, it was a huge deal, obviously. But there were 6 teams at the time, so they haven't won since there've been 6 teams in the NHL. That's pretty rough.
The entire country's been striking out. You got these non-hockey cities, Tampa, Vegas. Obviously you got like the Northeast, Washington and Pittsburgh and Boston that have done well also. But it's just like these random hot weather cities in America winning championships, and the whole country of Canada is just struggling. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't had one since '93, I think.
Yeah.
With the Canadians, we've had a couple of teams go to the finals. Like Montreal was in the finals last year.
Yeah.
I went to university in Montreal. Like I absolutely love the city. I think it's an amazing city. But growing up as a Maple Leafs fan, like I couldn't have possibly cheered for them to win the cup. Like I don't care Canada or no Canada. There's no way I would have been happy to see Montreal win the cup.
Right. I did see you went to college in Quebec, and I believe I saw you went to McGill University. Is that where that is, or is that a different college?
Yeah, that's in Montreal.
Got it. Okay. So if coming from Toronto, what made you want to go to school out there?
Okay. I mean, so there's like a wholesome answer and a non-wholesome answer. Well, part of it is that, that school has a very strong academic reputation. I wanted to, I'd lived in Toronto my whole life. I basically lived in the same house my whole life. So I kind of wanted to get out of my neighborhood, make a change, like see part of what else there is to see. I know Montreal is not the farthest you could possibly go, but it's a different province. It's, it's a 6-hour drive.
Sure.
It's getting outside the comfort zone. The other less wholesome answer is that Quebec has a drinking age of 18 compared to the drinking age of 19 in Ontario. So a lot of people who are interested in that type of activity find their way to Quebec early in their university career.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, at what point did you decide to be a sports writer, or that's what you thought you wanted to be?
It's not an issue. I always love sports. Like I always, I watched a ton of sports. A lot of the writing I do is kind of statistically driven. Like even I was always kind of geared that way. I was interested in math. Like
right.
The fact I ended up as a sports writer is not a surprise, but that's not where I started. I started off in a degree that was more economics, and it looked like I do something in government work, and that was kind of the path I was going down. And then sort of, I don't know, early 2010s, I guess, there's sort of a boom in internet sports blogging, and you can kind of go and write something for SB Nation or Fansided or various sites like these are starting to spring up. And I'm a huge NFL fan, actually. My team's the Seattle Seahawks.
Okay.
Not for any particularly good reason. When you're in Canada, you kind of just get to choose. So I chose that back in 2002, and I'm living with it. It's been an all right run, actually.
I mean, you had the Legion of Boom, you had Russell Wilson, you got the Super Bowls, you had a good run there, and now things are going to be different for you guys.
Yeah, the next decade won't be as good as the last, but that's okay. So I started writing for a Seahawks blog, and it was purely like a hobby. It was like, I've got in university, often you have like some spare time kicking around. And it's like, I like writing, I love sports, and I just saw it. I think I was reading the blog, and I saw like, we're looking for writers. Well, I'm like, all right, whatever, I'll give this a shot. And I just got some good early feedback. Like people seem to really enjoy my writing. And then I saw some other opportunities, and I kind of built on that. And then when I came out of university, I saw a very specific post-grad program that was like sports journalism exactly in Toronto. And I didn't think something like that even existed, and I kind of stumbled across it. I thought I was going to go into advertising. Like there's a whole bunch of things going on in my head,
Sure.
but I thought this is a 1-year program. If it doesn't work out and I don't get a job, like I know it's tough out there. If I don't get any jobs or anything, I'll go back to the drawing board and I'll try something else. But I've had some good breaks and some bad breaks, but overall, it's a tough business, and I've been able to stick around, and it's been a good time.
Yeah, you've been with a lot of different networks or publications I've seen, even like Yahoo Sports Canada, you've been with other ones too. And you kind of have made your way through. What's it been like on your journey as like a writer so far in the last like 10 years?
It's been interesting. Out of school, I had kind of a part-time job at SportsNet, which is sort of, the big TV broadcaster, but their their website. So I was working kind of more of as an editor there, and I was just trying to write as much as I could for whoever would have me. So like I wrote for Canadian Cycling Magazine. To be fair, I actually do really like cycling, but I wrote for Canadian Cycling Magazine. I wrote for Baseball Prospectus Yankees site. Any opportunity that I could see, I kind of gobbled up. And then ultimately I landed sort of my first full-time gig was at Yahoo Sports Canada, and that was a more conventional, like covering the Blue Jays day in, day out type of role. And then after 3 years, they basically shut down half that team, stopped doing baseball anymore. I was on the outs again, and then I kind of had to have the same attitude. It's like, okay, who's going to have me? And like people at Yahoo Sports still really liked my work, so I did some work there. I did some work back with Sportsnet people, did some writing for The Athletic. I was a lot more established by then, so it was a little bit different than I was right out of school. Like there was a lot more opportunities, but even now I'm writing for a sports betting, a sports book called North Star Bets in Canada, as well as doing Sportsnet, as well as doing Yahoo. You kind of have to grind in this industry. Like it might be that someday in the near future, I'm at a more, this is the one thing I'm doing, but for most of my career, it's just piling up as many things as you can do. And, you learn a lot doing that way. Different people want different things from you. You become more versatile. Like it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's not the worst. It's definitely not the worst thing in the world to bounce around a little bit. You gain all these different skills. Last thing on your general story, for you to come back to Toronto and cover the Blue Jays as like your hometown team, what did that mean to you?
It's, it happened to me fairly young too. Like the first time I stepped on the field covering the team day in, day out, I think I was 25 or something. And, I'd never thought that this was, there's one team in Canada. In the US, it's a little bit different, right? Like you work your way up and then maybe you go from one market to the other and you find what the right opportunity is.
Yeah.
In Canada, especially in hockey, it's a little bit like that because there are different hockey markets. But there's really one place to do baseball. So it's a very tough nut to crack. And I, pretty early in my career, I had this first opportunity and I was so excited by it. And, it's funny I talk about stepping on the field, it's an artificial turf field. It's not a beautiful ballpark in a lot of ways. Like it has its flaws. Early in April, the dome is closed every day because it's just too cold or too rainy or whatever. Like it doesn't open till late in the summer. So I remember the first time I was covering the team, I'm like, man, it is kind of dark. And it was the 2017 Blue Jays. It was a team that expected to be good, full of kind of crotchety veterans who were underperforming. Like it was just not, I was like, this is so exciting. And then about 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh, this is a bit of a dreary place to be. But, obviously no complaints, but it is interesting because I think in the US, the experience is I seek out the market, I find the opportunity, I'm willing to make the move. And in Canada, unless it's hockey, which is everywhere, Toronto is essentially the place to be right now. Montreal lost its baseball team, Vancouver lost its NBA team. Those teams maybe come back someday. It's hard to say, but Toronto is really the mecca for sports media. So I was kind of born in the right place and came back to the right place. And that's how it's worked out.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. Before we get to the current team, you did bring up a name that I wanted to ask you about, Roy Halladay. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but I mean, guys from my era used to emulate his mechanics and the way he would pitch and what pitches he was throwing and just his focus and mindset. And I've heard great stories about his preparation and his work ethic. What will you remember about Roy Halladay?
I think I was gonna say this is gonna age me yet. I don't feel like I'm that old, but I remember going through the newspaper and like figuring out when he was gonna pitch because that was the game you were gonna go to. And I ended up writing quite a bit about Roy Halladay later on when, unfortunately when he passed away and then when he made the Hall of Fame, I ended up kind of researching him sort of beyond my initial fandom. And one thing that was wild to me is that like when he pitched, the Blue Jays were like the best team in baseball. And when he didn't pitch, they were like every year they were well below 500 in games he didn't pitch. So even though I didn't know those statistics at the time, I knew that vibe. I knew the fact that like when Halliday's pitching, this is different. And like making an effort to see those starts, making an effort to, you know, even if you're on the road, listen on the rate. Like it was appointment viewing in a way that, you know, the Blue Jays haven't had since, and they've had lots of great pitchers since. But, you know, Halliday was arguably the best pitcher of his decade. And the thing when you say like, what will you remember about, it almost wasn't one start. Like he had those amazing starts with the Phillies. Later, he had the perfect game. He had the no hitter. He did have that start early in his career, but I was a little bit younger before I was paying close attention. It wasn't really the individual start. It was just that like every start, he was so consistent. He was so like every start felt like 7 innings, 1 run, 4 hits, 4 strikeouts, no walks. Like it wasn't that like this, and that, you know, partly it's because the team didn't have success. Like I don't have this amazing playoff moment to draw on or something like that. But it was just the fact that he was a human metronome that I'm going to remember. And yeah, I mean, he's probably my favorite baseball player to watch and to think about to this day. And it's unfortunate he's not with us today. And it's amazing that he was recognized by the Hall of Fame. But I think that there were times when people thought, oh, his career isn't that long compared to some guys. He, you know, he didn't get as many wins as some guys. He had some struggles early in his career. Like there was, I remember at points before he retired, people wondering whether he was going to be a Hall of Fame guy or not. And in my head, I was always like, he better be in the Hall of Fame. Like this guy's a Hall of Famer. And so I was happy to see him rewarded with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think his wife accepted the award, or, you know, the recognition at the event. All right, let's talk about this 2022 version of the Blue Jays that you're very tied into. There were big expectations coming into this season with all the talent, the young talent they have in the free agent signings. How would you characterize the team so far? We got about 30 games-ish at the time we're recording this of what you've seen. What are your thoughts so far in the first month?
I think that this is a good baseball team. The evidence in terms of what's actually happened doesn't always support that. You know, they've got a negative run differential. Their offense is sort of middle of the pack. You know, some of their more reliable pitchers, like Jose Barrios, is an unbelievably reliable pitcher. Like he's not the most dominant pitcher, but like year in, year out, he gives you the same thing. He's durable. He keeps his team in games. Maybe he's more of a 2 than a 1, but like very, very good. And he just hasn't been that guy. Like, you know, we're talking on Wednesday, like he had a rough outing again. Like he's struggling with hard contact. He's not striking guys out. There's a lot of players on these teams on this team that you know are going to be significantly better than they've shown. Bo Bichette got off to a brutal start. Like he's one of the best young infielders in the league.
Yeah.
You know, I think even Vladdy isn't really hitting at the level he can and should be hitting at. They've missed some guys. You know, Teoscar Hernandez is a huge part of that lineup. He's been out most of the year. Danny Jansen has been interesting with the bat at the end of 2021, amazing out of the gate 2022, and a great defender as well. Like they've missed him. So you look at the overall record, you know, it's a 17-15 team. You look at the run differential, like you could look at the team and sort of the facts of the matter and say, this isn't a great ball club. And that's a defensible statement, but the talent is still there. And there's not a lot of guys on this team that you'd say, oh, this year I've learned something about them that makes me want to give up on them. It's like, they're not hitting with runners in scoring position. That should come around. The guys who are good haven't been as good as they should be. Like maybe, you know, Hyun-Jin Ryu, to pick on one guy who had a really rough start to the year and then got hurt. And maybe you're more worried about him now than you would have been. But most of the guys, you feel like they're going to come around.
I was actually looking up some Blue Jays stats before we got on, and I was shocked to see that this group of studs is last in the league in average with runners in scoring position. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, it's a huge talking point here. And it's interesting because it's like, what do you do about that? You're not going to, you know, like, for example, Bichette struggling. Well, you're not going to hit him 9. Like, you're going to trust that he's going to come around. And these hitters last year, I think they were even better in running runners in scoring position than they normally were. And they were normally excellent. Like, this was an incredible lineup in 2021. So, and it's basically the same cast of characters. So I don't think it's guys who are like, oh, this guy always clams up when it matters. I don't know. It's just one of those sort of freak occurrences, it seems to be. Like sometimes you see the opposite. Sometimes you see teams for, a quarter of a season, just seem to get that hit exactly when they need it, and they run off this huge win streak. And the Blue Jays are doing the opposite of that right now. But I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with the club's DNA, the managers, hitting coaches.
Sure.
Like, it's all guys they've had success with before. So there's not a real reason to believe they can't turn that aspect around.
Right. Could just be a slow start. It happens to everybody. I wanted to ask you about this team, which is loaded with sons of former big leaguers. So you got obviously Vlad Guerrero Jr., you got Craig Biggio's kid, Kevon Biggio, and you mentioned Bo Bichette, Dante Bichette's kid. What's impressed you about these guys so far at such a young age, that the fact that they're sons of, big leaguers, but also you can see the potential with all these guys?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Blue Jays fan, even if for whatever reason 2022 went down the drain, and I don't think it will, I think they're going to turn it around. There's extra playoff spots this year. I think they're going to be fine. But even if it did, like, this is a group of players who are very young, very good at, often at important positions. Like, Teoscar Hernandez is part of that group too. Like, he's a 2-time Silver Slugger. People always forget about him. But also, if you want to go sort of the soft skills, like, these guys grew up around the game. I feel like they're mature for their age in some cases. Like, they've been around the spotlight. Like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's been covered intensely, since he was a teenager. Like, the spotlight's been on him. Like, it's not like he showed up and he had to get used to that.
Right.
Like,
he grew up in the clubhouse.
That's been him. Biggio is a guy, and he's not the same talent level as the other guys. He's more of a utility player, maybe a little bit more, but he's like you talk to him, like, he's unbelievably level-headed, mature, to the point, always says the right thing. Like, I know for a fact the organization, like, loves his attitude. And I'm not saying that you have to have baseball parents to be like that, but I think it certainly helps. And another guy
does. Yeah.
On the team, like Lourdes Gurriel Jr., like, he's from Cuban baseball royalty. Like, just because we don't know those players as well because it's a different league, like, it's exact same experience with him. And these guys are pretty loose and they have a lot of fun. And I think part of that, I mean, maybe not this particular second, but in theory, they have a lot of fun. And I think part of that is that they're able to relax because they've been around this, and they don't let it get to them, and they don't feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. Like, they know it's just a game because they've seen the ups and downs that their parents have gone through. So, there's the talent, and the talent's there. Vladdy's one of the best hitters in the league. Bichette's one of the best infielders. And then there's, the camaraderie. These guys, a lot of them came up in the minors together, the character. Like, Blue Jays fans are really gravitating to this group. Like, if you take the 2015 group, like, that's an incredible Blue Jays team that people talk about. That's a group of guys in their 30s. You had some kind of curmudgeonly personalities there. Like, they weren't very well liked around the league. And, like, sure, Blue Jays fans, they were so good, and, they were probably the best team in the league that year. Blue Jays fans obviously attach themselves to them. But I haven't seen a group of young players that are going to be here for a long time that this city has kind of glommed onto, because when they were doing that, earlier in the 2000s, it just, none of the guys they had were even close to this good. Like, they weren't MVP candidates. They've never developed, not never, but in the last sort of 20 years, they haven't developed a young core of players this good. And yeah, it is fun to watch how much the city is getting attached to this team, especially when the summer comes and the other sports kind of fade to the sideline.
Yes, and I do think you guys will start to turn it around in the right direction with that much talent. I don't see an issue with that. The Blue Jays also signed starting pitcher Kevin Gausman in the offseason, coming off a great year with the San Francisco Giants. This dude's got arguably the best splitter in the league. You've done some deep analytical looks into Gausman's stuff. How much more improved is he from now when he began his career? And what sticks out to you about what Kevin Gausman brings to the Blue Jays?
Yeah, I mean, he's been, Alec Manoah is amazing, and like whatever you can compare, column A, column B. In my view, Gausman's been their most impressive pitcher. I think he's got like a 46-1 K to walk right now. Like,
insane.
It's insane. Like, you can't luck into that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that for also, like, anyone can pitch 3 starts without giving up a run just because, like, they're 5th starter, but they got hot for a second. You can't do that. Like, there's almost no one in the league can do what he's doing with that. The splitter this year, I mean, it was amazing last year. It's amazing in 2020 too. Like, 2020 is this weird shortened season, so we tend to kind of throw it out a little bit.
Right.
I think coming into 2022, a lot of people said, oh, Gausman's only been good for 1 year, really. Like, does he deserve this big money? You're replacing Robbie Ray, the Cy Young winner, essentially with him. You probably could have had either at approximately the same contract, like what Ray signed with the Mariners was pretty similar.
Right.
And so there was some kind of hand wringing, like, is that the right move? Gausman's been great since 2020. Like, he started really focusing on the splitter. Like, he's got the fastball high and the splitter low, and those pitches tunnel. Guys don't know what's coming. And then this year, one thing that's really worked for him is he's really put more of the sliders into the mix. Like, he's been such a 2-pitch pitcher, and like that's worked. Hell, that worked for Ray as well. Like, last year, Ray was just a fastball slider guy, and he was dynamic. I'm not saying that that can't work, but this year, it seems like the Blue Jays pitching staff has emphasized just mixing in that slider a little bit more, and it's giving people something to think about horizontally, not just vertically. No, I mean, he looks like a legitimate Cy Young threat right now, which is wild because he's the guy who's supposed to give you like a backfill on the Cy Young and hopefully not be that much worse. And now he's been as good as Ray was last year.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. Your guys I mean, just the names on paper. You signed Kikuchi last year, like you got Manoah who's doing well. If Barrios figures it out, like you got all the names. Like I feel like it's just gonna maybe they need a little bit more time to start gelling.
Yeah, the rotation's been, the strength of the team, really. And, that's before Barrios has not pitched well. Like he's capable of being, at the very least a top 3 guy.
Yeah.
I don't know how much play Manoah gets kind of south of the border and nationally, but his start to his career was unbelievable. And then this year he's kind of come out and done it again. And he's a little bit of a weird guy because he's huge, like physically he's massive, and he's like this bulldog, and he's got this presence on the mound, and he throws hard. But some guys this year, like he'll throw like 94, 95. Like a lot of guys throw harder these days in MLB.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes his command's a bit spot. Like he's been known to hit batters, like not intentionally. He's not a bad guy or anything, but like he loses the handle quite a bit. It doesn't seem like he always knows where it's going. But guys just can't seem to square him up. Like he's got the nasty slider, he's got 2 fastballs, and it's moving all over the place. And when a guy does that, initially you're like, is that luck? Like, is he getting some luck on balls in play? What's going on? And so for him to come out in 2022 and do basically the exact same thing as he did in his rookie years is really encouraging, kind of indicating that like, maybe he wasn't lucky last year. Maybe this guy is just really hard to make good contact against. And that certainly seems to be the case.
Sure. Let's talk about the 23-year-old young catcher, Alejandro Kirk, who's apparently becoming one of the best pitch framers in the league. And he's only 5'8", 265 pounds, trying to make life a little easier on the pitchers this year behind the plate. What are your early thoughts on Kirk so far handling the staff?
I mean, Kirk's an interesting guy. He, you just said it, 5'8", 265 pounds. Like that's not how guys are normally built in professional athletics, kind of regardless of the sport, right?
Right.
And he was rushed to the big leagues in 2020. Like he had no experience above high A, and they rushed him to the big leagues because they just needed some bats. And in 2020, it was that weird season, the expanded playoffs, and they're like, oh, we can grab one of those spots. And they thought, oh, this guy can help us. And so he kind of got rushed up in 2020, did really well. And then in 2021, they kind of felt like they need to keep his bat around again, but he wasn't getting full-time defensive reps. And, based on people questioning his athleticism and his lack of experience, which, fair, he didn't actually have that much experience. Catching a game is a very difficult thing to do. So there's more concerns about his glove. Again, like, oh, this guy's around for his bat. He's playing sort of a part-time DH/backup catcher role. It's a bit of a weird situation because that's something veterans do, right? Like you bring in a veteran guy, like, oh, I like his bat. He's a bat first catcher. We'll use him off the bench and occasionally he'll catch. But when guys are young and they're still developing, you rarely put them in a role like that. And then this year, Danny Jansen goes down with an injury. And, they got like Taylor Heineman sitting around, like Zach Collins, who's notoriously a bad defensive catcher. Like they don't really have a choice. Like they got to throw Kirk out there and see what he can do. And he's just taken the step forward. Like he's blocking balls well. His framing has been among the very best in the league. I mean, there's a lot of jokes about how he frames low pitches because he's naturally low to the ground. And then maybe there's some truth to that. That's definitely been one of the things he's good at. But he snags the outside corner too. Like he's got good, he's got those good still hands. Like he's not yanking the ball around in that really obvious way. He's really impressive. And I don't know what his long-term future at the Blue Jays is, because their top prospect, Gabriel Moreno, is like a top 10 prospect in all of baseball and a catcher who's supposed to be able to do it all. And I think the organization sees him as the catcher of the future. But, if Kirk keeps doing this, I mean, A, it just keeps opening up at bats for him. And then B, maybe that makes him a trade piece that's more appealing down the road. Instead of, a part-time catcher who can hit a little bit, another team might see him as a full-time catcher.
Yeah, I think we'll see if he has a bright future. Obviously, you got to, in most cases for catchers nowadays, you got to hit a little bit to stay around, but we'll see if he can stay in the big leagues. Let's move on to George Springer, who joined the Blue Jays in recent years, and he's kind of been the staple as the leadoff hitter in the lineup. Most people remember him on the Astros before this current stop. With his hitting ability and defensive ability in center field, what do you think he's meant to the Blue Jays so far?
Oh, he's been huge. They got about half a season from him in 2021. And when he was there, like their record when he was there was way better than when he wasn't.
Yeah.
And, some of that's a coincidence, right? Like it's one player. He can't control how the other 8 guys hits. He doesn't pitch, etc. But like you mentioned, he's a two-way contributor. Like he's a great hitter and he plays good defense in center field. He's not a Gold Glover, but he can move. And he's a guy who like he kind of chugs up to that full speed when he's got that long run to do, because he's a bigger, powerful guy. And when he really gets up to full speed, he can make some cool catches against the wall.
Yeah.
I think he's been their best player early in the season. This year he's been a little bit more aggressive at the plate, which, for a leadoff hitter, maybe isn't ideal. You'd want him to take more walks, but like that's really nitpicking because the guy's been incredible. And, there's some concern over his contract. It's a long contract. Like he's a guy into his 30s. But one thing that's impressive with him, that we have the stuff on StatCast. Like his sprint speed hasn't moved for like 4 years. Like he's as fast as he's ever been. He's swinging the bat as good as he ever has. Like, Father Time is undefeated. At a certain point, he's going to slow down. But, he's 32 now, and there's just no indication that that's happening in any way, shape, or form. And he's a bit of a weird leadoff hitter just because he has so much power. He's not the prototypical guy. He's not going to steal bases, but that's where he likes to be. And if he's getting the most at bats on this team, that's definitely a good thing for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, I did see you guys' stolen base numbers aren't great so far. It's just, I mean, I don't know what it is. You're hitting a lot of homers, but you're just, for some reason, obviously we talked about, lack of runners in scoring position. What do you think is going on with the lack of movement on the bases?
Yeah, there's a couple of guys who can do it on this team. I mean, Bichette can steal bases. He got picked off like twice in the first, I don't know, I want to say like 10, 15 games. He had a bit of a weird start out of the gate. He also didn't get on base a lot out of the gate. So that probably was a big issue for him. They've got guys with the raw speed. Like Teoscar Hernandez actually has like very, very good raw speed, but for whatever reason, never stole bases well until last year. He started to steal some bases. I thought he might do that this year. Injuries have kind of taken that away. They brought in Raimel Tapia. In theory, he should steal some bases. Again, you got to get on base to steal bases, so that's been an issue.
Sure.
I mean, I don't see this team as like a Kansas City Royals going to steal a ton of bases. I think the good thing with them is that, if you throw out the Alejandro Kirks of the world and maybe the Vladdies of the world, like there's a lot of guys in this lineup that have like generally pretty good athleticism. Like, Matt Chapman is an above average runner. Gurriel Jr. can steal. Like there's not guys who you're worried about stealing a base, but they're guys who can nab one as a surprise now and then. And, when the order is struggling, like they're struggling right now, that could have a little more value.
You did bring up Matt Chapman. I forgot. I'm glad you brought that name up because I forgot to ask you about him. That was a big move. Most people thought in the offseason for the Jays to get him from Oakland, who just seems to get rid of every good player known to man. So I'm surprised he's slow out of the gates at hitting like 190 right now. What are your thoughts on Matt Chapman so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope with Chapman is that he could hit more like he did in 2018, 2019. Like he's been a borderline MVP candidate before. And so like if you get that guy and he's hitting kind of sixth in your order, it's like, wow, this is taking the lineup to a new level. He's been more like the guy he was last year, which is kind of a league average hitter with more power and less on base than the average dude. That's not a disaster because his defense is, it's unbelievable. He's still incredible. Like, I think Blue Jays fans are really enjoying what he can do defensively. I think some of the most fun plays to watch come at third base, to be honest. Like there's just a lot of drama, the big throws, charging across the dime. He does a good job of making his shortstop's life easier because he ranges into that gap a ton. And so then the shortstops don't have to go to their back end and try and make those huge throws across the diamond. So in some ways, he's come as advertised. He's been basically the guy he was last year. I think the Blue Jays are kind of hoping he'll be a step better than that, and he may still, but he struggles to make contact with the ball. Like, it's hard to do that in modern baseball. Guys throw hard and the off-speed stuff is nasty. I have some hope that he'll ultimately be a better than average hitter, but I think that the first month or so has shown that the idea of him going back to that 2018, 2019 guy just due to a change of scenery probably isn't going to happen.
Right. Okay. I agree with that. Just overall, the team is above average right now in the standings, but they randomly lost, 3 of 4 to the Cleveland Guardians, who actually are playing decent ball right now. And I know you just lost 2 to the Yankees at the time of this, obviously a heartbreaker the other night with the walk-off from Judge. Then you got the Rays coming up. Where do you see this team in the next few weeks as far as I know they have a decently, they got the Reds coming in. I think you got Seattle, who's whatever. So where do you see this team now that this first 30 games is over, moving forward the next month or so?
Yeah, you point out that Guardians series, like that's the one that hurts, right? Like they've had a really hard schedule to update. They've seen a ton of the Yankees. They've seen a bunch of the Astros. The Red Sox probably aren't as good as maybe you thought they would be, but they've seen they really haven't had those pushover teams. They've had no games against Baltimore, which is always like something people in the AL East love to get their games against Baltimore. I think the Rays beat them 17 out of 19 or something last year.
That's brutal. I did see you guys randomly had success against the Astros though, and they're still good.
Yeah, they did have some success against the Astros. I think that sort of early, before, I don't know, a week and a half before we have this conversation, the Blue Jays have a really good record, and you're like, wow, they've done their tough schedule and they've got this good record, and they kind of threw that away with this last stretch against the Guardians and the Yankees. Like their schedule's still tough for the next little bit. Like going to Tropicana has always been brutal for them. The Rays are always tough. You got to wait till kind of June when things ease off for them. So. I think the hope for them is that they get through May and, they're still not well above 500 now, but I think they'd hope to be at least a little bit above 500 and then make some hay in June. In theory, weather's warming up. It's easier to get offense going and you start facing some of these worst teams. Like there's no panic going on with this team, but, the next little bit is not particularly easy on them.
You got to play the Angels coming up too, I think.
Yeah. Angels are scary like that. Yeah. That lineup is just scoring tons of runs, and their pitching has always been kind of a garbage fire. And this year, I don't know if it's amazing, but it's respectable. You combine respectability with that lineup if it's healthy, like that. Trout, Ohtani at the height of their powers have never been healthy together for an extended period. So if they do that all year, as a baseball fan, I just want to see more of that. Like I love to see what the Angels are doing because just from Mike Trout, my heart goes out to him. Like, it's just an incredible player who deserves so much more. So
for sure,
I hope the Angels do well.
Yes, I did go to their game the other day. That's the team right up the road for me. So I'm in Orange County, and I got to see Ohtani's first Grand Slam ever the other night. That was pretty crazy.
That's special. He didn't do that in Japan either, right?
Yeah,
so it's like truly his first Grand Slam.
Yeah, pretty cool. So. But I'm still secretly a Dodger fan, but we won't say anything about that. I want to talk about some changes in baseball, especially with the actual baseballs. There's been talk about them being deadened this year. Now, I think you wrote about it being great for a guy like Kevin Gausman who pitches to contact, so it's awesome. But maybe offensively, maybe that's part of the problem for these young guys so far, that the balls are just not traveling like they used to.
Yeah, it is interesting because across baseball offense is down, like that's a fact. And it seems like the ball is the most likely culprit. And some guys are going to benefit, like, a lot of pitchers. I point out Gausman because he's someone who gives up hard contact. So it's like, because he likes to pound the zone with the fastball. So it's like, well, if the hard contact's not going to do as much damage and you're going to be striking out 46 for every walk, you're going to be in a good spot.
Right.
For some hitters, it's going to be a problem. I think that when you talk about the hitters at the very top, right, like the Trouts, the Ohtanis, the Vladdies, like those guys are probably going to be fine because when they hit home runs, like those home runs are 30 feet back from the wall anyway. So if it comes 10 feet in, it's not the end of the world. I think you run into trouble with hitters who have kind of that fringy power, and a lot of their home runs that were just clearing the wall a little bit are going to be outs this year. A guy with the Blue Jays who actually stands out with this is Tapia, who came over from the Rockies. Now, this guy's never been a power hitter, and he hits, I think he led the league in ground ball rate last year, something like 69%. Like, he just pounding balls into the ground. And he came to the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays are like, okay, we're going to get you to hit Like, we're going to get you under the ball a little bit. We're going to get you to hit with some loft. Like, you are fast, but you're not going to be a good offensive player if you just hit ground balls all the time. And he took to it. Like, he's done a better job not hitting ground balls. Okay, bad news is that like hitting fly balls isn't any good anymore.
Right.
That's an exaggeration, but it's not as good. So you take a guy and you try and kind of get him to do the best he can with his power, and then you're between a rock and a hard place because that power isn't as valuable anymore. So when you're watching your team's players, like your 8th hitter, your 9th hitter, your utility guy, I feel like those guys are going to be popping fewer over the wall. But your true premium power threats, I don't think you're too worried about.
Yes, I agree with that. I like to ask baseball people what their thoughts on all these rule changes are as well. So, for instance, the universal DH changing, and now it's universal DH. And also MLB reportedly is going to be banning the shift at some point, I think next year, if I'm not mistaken. What are your thoughts on those two changes to the game?
The DH, it's tough. I think, I grew up watching an AL team the whole time. So that watching the pitcher hit was sort of an interesting novelty. And there was sort of a fun relatability to it. It's like, oh, that's what I would look like out there, just like shaking a stick at 90 miles an hour. And a lot of that's probably silly because a lot of these pitchers were actually pretty good athletes in their time and far better hitters than I've ever been or whatever. But like, there's that level of connection you have and sort of some comedy that comes out of it. I think if you're a National League fan and you're watching it day in, day out, and the pitchers are coming up in big spots, it probably gets tiresome. So I understand why they did it. They want to bring more offense to the game. Like, I'm not against it. I'm not going to be we should stop this progressive move for more offense because I personally want to chuckle 4 more times during league play.
I'm totally with you. I don't think pitchers should hit. As a former pitcher, to me, it's a free out almost. Usually, it's kind of a waste of time. So I'm fine with the DH.
Yeah, I think it's the right move. There'll be moments I miss, when you get an AL pitcher who hits a huge home run, like Bartolo Colon hitting a home run late in his career. Like, that's one of my favorite baseball moments in recent history. So you lose that, but it's worth the price. So that's fine by me. Banning the shift is interesting. Intellectually, I hate it. Like, the idea that here's a good strategy that you guys came up with that's the right thing to do. Okay, stop doing it just because we don't want you to do anymore. Like, there's a part of my brain that like really rebels against that idea of like, oh, teams are being smart, so like let's not let them do that. And the 4-man outfield is cool and kind of creative and stuff. The game's hurting for offense, though. And I understand. I think that banning the shift probably isn't going to be the thing that fixes it. I don't know if it's going to be baseballs. I don't know if it's going to be, I know as a pitcher, you probably wouldn't want to hear this, but I don't know if it's going to be messing with the mound somehow. Whether it's
lowering the mound. Oh, man. Yeah.
They've done it before. They've done it before in baseball history. So I don't know what I think the banning the shift is probably not going to solve the bigger problems of guys aren't making enough contact. There's not enough action in the game, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It could help. So I'm of two minds on that. I struggle with it because especially this year, the game is really hurting for offense. So I find myself less opposed to it than I might have been if you asked me last year. I guess I'm still against it, but I won't be as outraged as maybe a past me would have been.
Gotcha. Okay. That's fair enough. Last couple questions. Any thoughts on, I know it's way too early for this, but who do you think might be in the World Series possibly by the end of this year?
Oh man. It sucks because it feels like the answers that are most sensible are the boring answers right now. The Dodgers, the way they're pitching, the way they're keeping runs off the board, that lineup is going to hit. And the way, if they're keeping runs off the board like that, like they look pretty unbeatable. It's, the Brewers are a team that I've always felt is like sort of made for playoff baseball and never seem to quite get over the hump. So like those are the teams that I'm watching in the NL. I know the Mets have done really well. I think I still need to see a little bit more for them. The Yankees, getting a close look. The Yankees are a good team, great bullpen, great lineup. I think the AL is a little bit confusing right now. I don't know if the kind of true top AL teams have emerged. The Astros haven't quite been themselves yet. The Angels are like super fun, but I wouldn't put them there yet. So I think that right now, I would pick the winner to be coming out of the NL as opposed to the AL because the AL just seems like a bit of a muck. But if you had put a gun to my head, I'd probably say Dodgers, Yankees, and I'd feel so boring about that.
I mean, that's probably going to be it. The NL West is ridiculous, and I'm obviously closer to it out here. I mean, even the Padres, Giants, Rockies, and all of a sudden Arizona is like a 500 team. It's just like,
where did that come? They went like 11-4 or something. I looked up and I saw that. I did not understand what's going on there. You look at that roster, and it's, you know, there's some pitching there. They have some starters, but yeah, you know, the Rockies being above 500 is bewildering. I mean, that's not going to last. I can't imagine that lasts.
No,
but that's okay. They had some fun. They're going to do well at Coors, and they're going to not do well not at Coors. Like, we all know how that story goes.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the NL the teams look more impressive to me right now.
Yes, I would agree with that. All right, so where can everybody follow you and get the Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast?
I am a pretty minimalist guy when it comes to social media. I just do Twitter basically. So you can find me at Nick Ashbourne, and then I'll be tweeting all my stuff out from there. It's probably easier to do that than to chase me down wherever I'm found. Blue Jays Happy Hour is the name of the podcast. It's on a platform called Call-In. So you can find it there if you actually want to call into the show, and we'll answer your questions. But you can also just listen to it afterwards on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, things like that.
That's what I did today. I've never heard of that call-in platform.
Yeah, it's new. I mean, it's fun. I've never really done anything that interactive before. I've just done kind of podcast. Me and my partner, Andrew Stoughton, we kind of do, you know, podcasts like your podcast, you guys hanging out, talking whenever.
Right.
And so doing it live and interacting with people's questions on the fly is a little bit more like traditional radio. And I've never done anything like that, but it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully the audience is enjoying it both live and afterwards.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, you do a great job covering the team. You're definitely plugged in. I wish you the best of luck this season, and the Blue Jays as well. Hopefully they can make a playoff run this year. So thanks again for being on with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
My thanks to Nick Ashbourne. I really enjoyed that interview. And if you want some in-depth Blue Jays analysis, there you have it. And if you want more, go ahead and check out Nick on Twitter at Nick Ashbourne. And check out his Blue Jays Happy Hour podcast. They react live after every single game, and they give you the deep analytical stuff that you've all been looking for. So I really enjoyed that talk with him, and I wish him and the Blue Jays the best of luck this year. They're struggling a little bit at the moment, but I think they have a lot of young talent, and I do believe in that team as well. So go Blue Jays. My thanks to Nick. And as always, you can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. That's on Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. You guys know where to go. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. You'll find all my stuff there. Check out all my links. You can like, share, comment. If you haven't done the 5-star rating, you guys know what to do. I say it at the beginning of every episode. So go ahead and hit that. All my TikToks are getting big. So you can believe I'm going in on TikTok right now. I'm using my platform there to do all kinds of fun stuff. So as always, thanks for listening. I appreciate you being here with me. And I will see you soon for another great episode. Have a good one.